the West is fundamentally best characterized as an oppressive patriarchy, which is it's absolutely absurd proposition, and that as a consequence, whatever actions they might take that are forthright and ambitious in terms of participating in that system are by the very nature of the system destructive. It's very difficult for me to understand how anybody can be properly motivated if that's the fundamental view of society and male participation in it. And I don't buy any of that. I think the idea that the West is fundamentally an oppressive patriarchy is an appalling idea, and the notion that the proper way to view history is as a battleground between ethnic identities or identities in general, or between men and women, it borders on the pathological. And so maybe it exceeds just merely bordering on the pathological.
The worst violence, you know, can be the violence of the mind. And I think men today in our society are told, you know, virtually from their young age to now, when they grow up, that they're doing the wrong thing, that they have done the wrong thing historically, that there's no place for them. And I think that's what Jordan speaks to a lot of young men. And look, I'm a father of 3 young boys under 5, and you know, reading a lot of Jordan Peterson's works through the book, I can understand why it resonates with a lot of people, because men today have lost their identity, and I think feminism has become a movement to overtake masculinity, and you know,
I'm a feminist. I don't want that.
Well, sure
I don't hate men. I'm not trying to destroy men. But
let's look at the empirical evidence. Let's look at the empirical in our schools. It's boys who are falling behind now, actually, in primary schools. It's boys who are falling behind at universities. It's young men who are suffering and have the worst mental impacts. It's the highest rates of youth suicide. You know, it's a serious issue, and I think you know, the question is right. I mean, yes, there's a lot of disenfranchisement in the world, but there are movements persecuting men in today's world.
It's almost as though we're talking about a structural issue and you're talking about a personal issue, and people who take personally the idea that we need to change structures, I think are misreading what the complaint is that people have. And so for me, the problem that I have with kind of structural rigidity of gender roles for men and women is that they hurt men and they hurt women. They hurt both. They hurt the men who want to stay home longer with their kids. They hurt men in real physical ways, because we do have a problem in this country where women are more likely to be the victims of violence at home. Men are more likely to be the victims of violence in public. But in both, the common factor is it's men committing the violence by and large, not exclusively, but by and large. And so these rigid kind of ideas of masculinity hurt everyone. And so when we talk about feminism, when we talk about changing those structures, it's to create an equality for the benefit of everyone and to get rid of some of the things that hold everyone back.
The fundamental truth we need to grasp here is that men are not oppressed because they're men. Men will be oppressed in their lives for all kinds of different reasons. They might be oppressed because they're working class. They might be oppressed because of their ethnicity or their religion or their age or their sexuality or their ability status. But at no point in human history have all men been judged, oppressed, disenfranchised, kicked out of institutions on behalf of their maleness. That just has not happened. What has happened in the West is that we developed democracy, and democracy actually meant the enfranchisement of all of us. It means the conversations about what society looks like, what manners are, what behaviour is, what courtesy looks like has changed, because it's not one group making that decision anymore. And I understand that that's a difficult transition for people who've grown up with narratives where those decisions and those institutions belong to a very narrow demographic of people, which, by the way, never included all men. That it's difficult to get your heads around a new way of behaving and engaging. But it's necessary, because we are actually a community, we are one society, we all have an equal right to participate. And taking bait from internet misogynists on the oppression of men is not a conversation that I get into. I've been on the internet too long to fall for it. Men are not oppressed as a general group, and my sympathy to any man who does feel oppression in any other part of his life.
The point Van made is very difficult to argue with, in the sense that we'll start on a level playing field. It's no coincidence that women have only been largely voting and participating in democracy in Australia in the 20th century. Now, is that a total lack of intelligence, capacity or fairness? Or I don't know. It strikes me that you only have to look at most of those metrics to realise that the empowerment of women, the emergence of women from life beyond child rearing, and this is not to derogate child rearing at all, it's a foundational, vital foundational institution. But as women's horizons have expanded in a finite number of opportunities, some men have lost out. especially with as we've automated, the expansion of technology that has removed a huge amount of emphasis on traditional masculine attributes of physical strength and so on. The workplace has changed. It's a fluid, dynamic environment. Men are feeling threatened by this, and there is a sense that some men are translating it as they're losing.
What I tell people consistently is that they have to look to themselves. And it's not because I believe that people are in full control of their lives. You know, we're all subject to bad breaks and sometimes to terrible luck, but your best bet is to do what you can, to take care of yourself properly, to treat yourself like you're someone responsible for helping, which is rule 2, by the way, partly because I do believe in this ancient, fundamentally Western idea that people are of intrinsic value. I mean, look, we're all given the sovereign right to organize our own states, the responsibility to vote. Our state, our very state, assumes that you have the wisdom to keep the ship of states sailing straight. And it's because there's something about you that, at least in principle, has the possibility of being remarkable if it can be manifested. And I'm reminding people that not only do we believe that, but that it seems to be true. And it isn't obvious to me that there is anyone, or there has been anyone for the last 4 or 5 decades, let's say, who's done a credible job of drawing a relationship between the meaning in life that you need to sustain you and responsibility. And not just for you, because it's not an individualistic idea. It's responsibility for you and your family and your community. That'll do the trick. And your broader society.
The bigger issue is looking at disenfranchisement. People aren't disenfranchised. If you're being sold that it's feminism, a movement for equality that's never thrown a bomb, that's never picked up a gun, that's disenfranchising you, or globalism or socialism, we have not lived in socialist economies in the West in a very long time. It's been 4 decades of neoliberalism, and it's neoliberalism which has smashed communities. It's neoliberalism which has made consumption and material acquisition dominant values in society. It's neoliberalism that has destroyed the workplace and made jobs insecure and made our experience of economy so unstable. If people are feeling disenfranchised, if men feel disenfranchised, please let me reassure you that women feel disenfranchised as well, because we are all living in this destabilised economy and we are all suffering from that kind of consumer ideology.
I think it's a lazy term, identity politics. All politics is identity politics. Parties campaign on identity. It's whether they say we're a party of individual freedom, that's an identity, it's a concept. The idea that identity is purely clustered around, you know, rainbow politics or feminism or race, and again, I sound like I'm having a bet each way, and I probably am, because I'm torn on this. I was a bloke this day 7 years ago. So I've been on both sides. I don't believe I was toxic as a guy, but I could go back through my career and have plenty of times I didn't cover myself in glory, locker room talk, the whole lot. So I'm not going to pretend that we're all on a level playing field. But likewise, I just think this identity politics thing now is a lazy slogan that's eliminating real differences, and politics is about these symbols. And it's terrific we're all here having this disagreement tonight, because that's the great strength of the West, is that we do this in public.
Indeed.
And that no one deplatformed this gentleman, which would have been reprehensible. And I'm thrilled that we're here having this discussion.
I don't know if that was ever in prospect.
There's a change org petition out there.
The next question comes from Badham.